Awesome. Well, let's get started. Pete, I'll throw it over to you for a quick intro of this Wednesday, August 28th, Making Bots.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, today we're going to go through basically an AI agent that does a check-in for JetBlue. There's a whole heap of cool stuff going on in this one, lots of like complex state management and that sort of thing. So yeah, I'm looking forward to going through it with you all.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we love always to start with a quick look at some of the teams and logos that are building here. We always like to call out that like there are AI customer experience applications for every single industry. I know in this airline one, we have folks from the team at JetBlue here looking at what we're building, as well as Qantas, Porter, some other airlines as well. So we're really excited to see a lot of folks tuning in and coming here with their product team. So we'll get to building. If you're new to Voiceflow, a quick 10 seconds. We help enterprise teams design and deploy AI customer experiences at scale. We have you'll see our UX experience for creating these agents from Pete today, full developer toolkits and APIs behind the scenes to customize and control the end experience. And we're built for scale. Folks are typically relying on us with their whole product teams to ship rapidly and then ship across different use cases. So excited to show you that in action today. On the Making Bots side of the world, we love to talk about the two types of AI agent goals, right? Everything's boiling down to really two things that Pete and I are seeing. And Pete, correct me if I'm wrong, if something's changed in the last 2 weeks with customers you helped, but really the agents are falling into two buckets. They're either aimed at reducing costs or they're aimed at increasing conversion and revenue, right? On the cost side, you're typically seeing customer support with things like FAQ automation, level 1, level 2 ticket routing and resolution, or even order management. And then on the right-hand side for conversion, you're seeing things like product recommendations, cross-sell, upsell, lead capture, and routing. Now, as Pete mentioned, today's agent is doing a little bit of both, which is unique and exciting. So we'll call those out of like what is the goal, what's the business impact of the agent at this time. Awesome. And then I did want to call out some folks who are here might have already been at our Dev Labs event last week. We're partnering with Nico, Daniel, and Kim from the Voiceflow team and doing kind of a two-part series with these events now. So last week, Nico and team were using, I'll click to the next part, different parts of our platform, like custom interfaces and chat widgets and our developer APIs to build the seat picker extension that Pete's going to show today. So if you're curious throughout, I'll drop the link. You can go watch that on YouTube of actually like truly from a developer perspective, how did we actually build with custom code the extension to input the seat selection. Whereas today, Pete, and this is all of Pete's life, is working with our workflow builder, our knowledge base, intent classification, and the CMS. The goal there is more of the orchestration of the conversation and managing the conversational state, and then obviously the front end that you'll see. So that's just a quick flyby of how Dev Labs and Making Bots are going to be working together on the developer and kind of the product or conversational state management moving forward. So that's enough from me. Pete, I will throw over to you to kind of give an overview on the idea of orchestrating the conversation. How are you thinking about today's agent?
Yeah, cool. So this is kind of like a very, very high level flow chart showing how I was thinking about building this. So first off, you've got your check-in intent. So you're coming in there, and the first thing that you really wanting to understand is like, do we know the name and booking ID so that we can pass that on to a lookup sort of system? In this case, we're using Airtable to just look up the booking. But with part of that, you know, in this Making Bots, I've done a lot of design around state management so that you can kind of request all these things from a customer, but do it in a way that you can go at the flow and the pace of what your customer wants. So I've built multiple state managers throughout this flow. So yeah, this first one, we're looking to capture the name and the booking ID. You know, if the user was logged in, you wouldn't need to worry about that. Then we have another one where we're going, okay, we've looked up the booking, like, is there more than one guest to check in? So if there is, you know, we're going to want to dynamically create buttons for the user to be able to create, to be able to check that user in. Then once we have that sort of stuff, we're then going to go over to that seat selection tool, which Nico built, which is really cool. And then we will have a final kind of part of this flow, which is all about, capturing, again, looking at the state of the conversation and going, okay, now we need to put their name and booking ID, but really what it should be is the meal that they want to eat, safety declaration, which you have to do always. I always notice on check-ins that you have to, even if you're pre-checking in, you've got to do the safety declaration, even though you're not there yet. And you also have like any special assistance that you need. So say you've got a broken leg or something, you may need a wheelchair and that sort of thing. So we have a state manager for that specific part as well. So this is kind of like what I'm talking about when we are doing a state manager. So this is kind of how our fallback state manager works within this. And basically what we're doing is we have the user gets into a fallback, we check the last utterance, and then we work out whether they need to go down one of these different paths. So one of the fallbacks could be like, could we answer this with an FAQ? And if we can, we're going to answer it with an FAQ. Another one could be, the user said something random or off topic and we can't answer that. We just want to redirect the user, say, hey, like, it's great that you want to talk about that, but we're kind of doing this at the moment. So like, let's keep going. Then we have handoff to agent. And, there's also a chance that the user has gotten into this flow somehow and they shouldn't be in this flow and they don't really want to be in there. So kind of giving the user the ability to get out of the flow at any point in time as well. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing in this. And I guess we could start with a little screen share and I'll take you through.
I'll stop sharing, and while you pull that up,
Yeah.
I always like to look at the poll, and so far, majority of folks are starting in customer support, which is not surprising. Obviously, Pete, I think like a lot of folks are starting in like a crawl, walk, run mindset with how do I just automate FAQs to start, and that's the point that Pete's going to show here is like this bot can do that, right? This agent can answer FAQs, can answer repeated questions, but obviously it can do a lot more and actually take action on part of the user, which then is only possible with this level of control. Yeah, so excited to see it in action here, Pete.
Cool. All right, so we're going to jump into the chatbot. We are welcomed by JetBlue's new AI agent, Alex, who is powered by Voiceflow. So Alex is asking, let me know how I can help. So the first thing I'm going to say is, I want to check in. Now, what's happening here in the back end as we get into this flow, as I talked about before, we're checking the state of the conversation. So the first thing that it's going to do is it's going to ask for our name and then booking number. Had I said, my name is Alex, so my name is John Doe and my booking number is book 001, it would have skipped this whole thing. But I can just go John Doe, and then we go, sweet, book 001. Now, it's worth noting, I'm not using anything like entities here. I'm using LLMs to capture everything. And, when I take you through the actual design, you'll see how this all kind of works in concert together to do the whole thing. So then so it's found the booking. So it says, thanks for that, John. I'm ready to help with your check-in. Here are your flight details. So VF123, John Doe and Jane Smith from Toronto to London, Thursday, June 15th, 2023. Time is 4:30 a.m. Does everything look good for this flight? Would you like me to proceed with the check-in? So this is entirely generated by a large language model. We haven't, written this response, but it is worth noting within the prompt, I am giving it very strict guidelines on how to present the information. So it's basically providing the same thing every time. So we're going to say yes, check-in. And great, would you like to check in both yourself and Jane Smith or just yourself for now? Now, what I want to quickly do is go, what is the baggage allowance for this flight? And hopefully what this should do is it's going to go to that kind of state management for the fallback flow, which I was talking about before. And it's going to say, could you specify the fare type for your international flight with JetBlue? And I can say economy. I don't have that in the booking JSON that we have, what type of fare it is. So that's why it's asking that. And it's going to give us the response. And then it's bringing us back saying, would you like to check in both yourself and Jane Smith or just yourself for now? So we'll say everyone. So we're checking in everyone and it's going, thanks for your patience, John. And now it's basically providing a seat selection tool. So this is the thing which Nico built in the background. If you want to see how he built that and did all this sort of thing, it's using, I believe, our custom action step. Well, no, I know it's using our custom action step because I put it in the project. So it's using the custom action step, and he's built this whole thing in the background, which enables you to really like just select the seats and everything. So I am a tall person, so I'm going to say that we're going to go exit row. I'm not a bougie person though, so I'm not going to go business class. Okay, so we're getting in. Great choice. I've confirmed your seat selections D6 and D7. So then it's asking us for special assistance. Do we have any things that we need? And what I'm going to say here is I have broken my leg. Now, something like this in the old sort of way of doing conversational flows and that sort of thing, like if I said I have broken my leg, like that would have been really hard for a natural language understanding engine to kind of understand what we were talking about here. But in this case, me saying I have broken my leg, the LLM knows that I am John, and it's saying that I'll make a note for the wheelchair assistance for you. Next, could you please let me know your meal preferences for the flight? We have options like vegetarian, vegan, gluten-free, and standard meals. So I will say, I am standard. My wife is vegetarian. Again, in the old kind of way of building flows, this would be really hard to understand. But because we are using a large language model to classify where we are at any time in the conversation, it is able to go, I know that you are John and that your wife is Jane, and that Jane is the person who wants the vegetarian meal. Finally, we've got lastly, for safety reasons, we need to know if you or Jane will be carrying any dangerous items on board. This includes items like flammable materials, explosive, blah, blah. And we can say, no, we won't be. So it'll go on from here, and hopefully we're all checked in. So to recap, you have selected a standard meal. Jane has chosen a vegetarian meal. Wheelchair assistance has been arranged for you, and seat selection is D6 and D7. Is there anything else that you need? So that's all done, and the flow is finished. So I'm going to quickly stop sharing my screen, and then I'll jump into the actual Voiceflow project, and we can have a look at that.
While you do that, I gotta give you your flowers because I think that's your best build in what we've done, maybe 14, 15 making bots at this point. To me, that's like far and away such an awesome evolution of not only the how you've used Voiceflow and the control and the things you've learned from customers, but like a few folks were even commenting like the wheelchair support is such a really great touch. Like that this is not just a bot, it's not just a chat bot, it's truly like a conversational agent that's thinking about every niche case of the customer experience through, yes, a chat widget. You could do this in a mobile app, you could do this on voice if you wanted to, but like in this capacity it's through chat. So just wanted to give you your flowers because I've seen this demo now 4 or 5 times and it's my favorite by far. Like I wish every airline had it.
Yeah, look, I thank you very much, firstly. And yeah, it was one of those ones where I started to, as I was building it, and I started to think about some things that I wanted to do, and it worked. And I was like, whoa. So that's always the best thing about my job is I get to just build stuff all the time. And sometimes I surprise myself at what is possible with Voiceflow. So first up, when you hit the login flow, now this is going to be a little bit different than my usual making bots, where I usually like recreate one part of this flow. This flow is massive and there's so much going on. So rather than recreating one little part so you can kind of see how it works, I'm actually going to go step by step and go, this is how it's all working.
And just to answer any questions before we get them,
sure.
We will share a recording of this at the end so folks can rewatch. We'll also share a templated or like a copyable version of this project so you can take parts of this flow and experiment. Obviously, you'll need to add your own data and connect your own your data source. Obviously, choose the models you want to work with. But just as a call out, like you won't need to recreate this from scratch. Pete has done a lot of this work, and you can steal parts of the flow, et cetera. So just it's a good chance to kind of watch and really understand the brain space here.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so the first thing that we have here is we're checking whether the user is logged in or not. This is super simple. You know, we're going, is the user logged in or are they not logged in? And essentially, we don't have a way to log the user in this flow, so they're always not logged in. So we're going to end up going to this state manager. Now, the first thing that we do when we jump in here is one of the things which I find really powerful about Voiceflow is using the set AI step, you can actually fire off multiple prompts at once. So this first prompt, we are trying to work out the current state of the conversation, and we're putting that into a JSON structure. So here we're going, what's the user's name? What's the booking number? And if it doesn't have either of them, it's just going to output them as, I think it's like not captured or something like that. The other thing which is happening as well is we have a prompt which is directing, like, what do we want to do with the conversation at this point? So we are going, do we have all the information? Do we need to confirm information? Has this conversation been going on too long? So, maybe a user has kind of got stuck in this kind of loop here. We want to let the user exit if that's happening. We're looking at passenger engagement. We're looking at, are there any queries that we could potentially answer, like with a knowledge base, and do they want to discontinue the conversation, or have they said something completely unrelated? So an example of like something, if a user said something completely unrelated, I could say something like, I really like cheese. And this is going to go like, that's great that you like cheese, but this isn't why we're here. I appreciate your comment about cheese. As a JetBlue assistant, I'm here to help with your travel needs. Let's return to the check-in process. Could you provide me with your name? So it's basically always looking to capture that next piece of information.
And this is where like the conversational state and the orchestration is so impressive, right? Where like a traditional NLU bot or button based, it's like you say something like that, it's like, okay, conversation end, or it just restarts.
Sorry, I don't understand.
Like this is that next level of conversation. Like you can only do this with control over the LLM NLU model that you're actually working with, and obviously like the orchestrational, the conversational patterns that you've created. But just to call, it seems so simple, right? But it is such a different experience compared to basic bots.
Yeah, it's definitely a cool way to kind of design things. So the other thing, as you can see, this is what's happening at the moment in the background. So the JSON that we have is username not provided, booking number not provided. If I was to say John Doe, then this will update here. And what you can also see is before it said unrelated down there. So we can see John Doe. So that's updated there. And then we can see the conversation direction is continue. The passenger has provided their name, but the booking number is still missing. We should ask for this information next. So we have those two things firing off at the same time, and they're kind of working in concert together. Now, the best thing about being able to fire them off at the same time is you don't have to chain prompts together in a way that causes latency. They're both happening in the same API call. So this is a much faster way to kind of fire off lots of prompts at once to be able to do something. So what happens after that? Because we are capturing everything in a JSON structure, we're just using the JavaScript block, although in this instance, I'm using an action. If you don't know how to do an action, basically, you just pull something out from here, you go action, and you have basically our blocks. So in this instance, I've done code, and we have that little action in there. So in here, I'm basically pulling out from the username and passenger name, and I'm applying them to two separate variables. I'm then going over to a function here, and this function, basically, we're taking the username, we're taking the booking ID, and we're returning a whole heap of stuff. So I'll give you a quick demo of what that looks like. If I go John Doe and I go book 001, we're going to return this information. So number of passengers 2, booking found, massive passengers, flight details, destination, departure time, etc. Then we're going over to the next thing. And of course, my mouse is dying. Making bots and my mouse are not friends. Then we're doing a very simple one. So before, remember when I said where we have written a prompt which is very strict in how it responds when it's confirming the flight details. Basically, I've kind of said, start with a brief, friendly acknowledgement like, thanks for that name. Use a numbered or bulleted list to show the flight details. Include these things. Use Markdown to format your response. Thanks, name, brief acknowledgement. Here are your flight details. We give the flight details confirmation question. We've got all this, and then I have at the prompt, we've got, this, now take a deep breath, craft a response, etc., etc. So that's what's basically writing that response every time. Now, before when I did this, I think we were at that point, or maybe we're at the confirm how many passengers. Either way, it doesn't really matter. We have a fallback flow here. And this is that fallback flow that I showed you in the initial part of the demo when I was showing the flow chart. So the way that this one works, very similar. We basically have a prompt here, which is going, and it's a big one, but ultimately we want to go, do we want to go down and answer the question with a KB? Do we want to redirect the customer? Do we want to do a handoff? Or do we want to end the conversation? And our input data here is the conversation history, the user's last utterance, the agent's last response. And that's kind of the way that that's working. And you'll see these like little things here, the way that I formatted that's basically, we're going down to, go away, Dashlane. Basically, this is going down here. And basically we have what would you call it? The logic, we basically have the variable fallback direction, which is what this is saving to. And we're checking, does it contain that KB? Does it contain redirect? Does it contain handoff, etc.? And that's how we're determining which way to go. Now, I think it's really important to note, one of the things that we are doing here is we're saying output that along with your reasoning for why you have chosen that. You know, large language models are prediction engines, essentially. So if you can let kind of an LLM cook for a little bit and say why it's kind of choosing the thing that it's choosing, it's going to be more accurate. And similarly, like if you had this in production, you would be able to like fire off an event to Mixpanel or wherever it is that you know, monitoring your conversations, and you would be able to go, okay, like, let's see why it has chosen this direction. And by having something that's doing that and showing you it's chosen this direction because X reason, it would enable you to look at conversations and work out how to like fix things going forward. Okay, so if we go back, the next thing that we're doing is we're confirming how many passengers. So, you know, one of the things that we talked about before was the buttons that are being created. Essentially, we basically we have a function that is dynamically creating the buttons on the fly. So if there is more than one user, it's going to say we'll have a check in one of them, the people, or we'll have a fallback flow. And so this is a function, you know, I can jump into it. It's, you know, some code. And basically this is the thing which is going, hey, like this is the buttons that you can choose. If the user, you know, once the user selects the seat, we then have, you know, a few things happening here. So we've got the response being basically like, thanks for checking those people in. Now it's time to choose a seat. We have the seat selection tool, which is done by Nico. And again, if you want to learn about the seat selection tool and how it all works, go watch the Dev Labs. I'm not going to dwell on it.
I dropped a link in the chat if anyone's curious. This recording will be up on YouTube as soon as tomorrow as well, so you can watch both side by side. If you're, I guess, depending on who's on your product team, you can share the recordings respectively.
Exactly. So then we have here a little bit of JavaScript coming out here, applying the selected seats to a variable. We're going to confirm the seat. And then again, we're going to another state manager. So determining next steps. So we've got this one here going, hey, we need to capture the meal preference. We need to capture that by passenger, meal type, quantity. We've got to work out whether there's special assistance, so passenger assistance type, dangerous items declaration, and selected seats. So we need to capture all these things within this part of the flow. We then have another prompt here, which is doing the direction of the conversation. So that thing that I showed you before for the fallback flow, very similar. It's kind of working out going, hey, where do we go now? And then we have one which is actually creating the response as well. So we have literally at any point in time, well, every time that we loop back into this, we have 3 prompts that are firing off all at the same time to reduce latency. And these prompts, this enables us to like really respond quickly to the customer. If we were doing this one prompt at a time, the latency would be quite large. And then we're firing off all these prompts all at once and then basically responding to the user. So basically this will loop until we have everything. And then finally, we're going down and confirming the check-in. Now, it's worth noting, I didn't end up building a function that would actually check the user in, but essentially what you would do is, because we are capturing this in a JSON structure, I would build a function that takes that JSON structure and goes, okay, like, let's apply this over to variables, and then let's go check the user in, depending on what we need to do. So yeah,
One thing I want to call out, Pete, too, is like, you're obviously talking, a lot about kind of like a low to pro code use of code on Canvas, right? And I think something to call out is like, a lot of folks maybe don't have like a 40-person dev team behind them. They're working with one dev, or they have some components. Like, can you speak like really quickly to how you've ramped learning how to like build conversations with kind of code as a co-pilot versus like,
for sure.
like I'm gonna hard code in LangChain, or like hard code in a dev tool. Like, it's kind of this mix that you're approaching right now.
Yeah, so a lot of what I do, and it's worth noting, I am not a developer, I cannot code, is because I've become pretty decent at prompting, and because I kind of understand how to code and what what the JavaScript means, I'm able to prompt a large language model by providing things like documentation to an API, say for Airtable. I can provide the documentation for the Voiceflow functions, and I can like describe exactly what it is that I want it to do. And then I'll use something like Claude. I'll have like both windows open side by side. I'll be, then I will be testing and going, hey, like, I got this error. What does this mean? Can you help me improve the function, et cetera, until we get something going. Now, obviously, like, if I was a big enterprise, I would not recommend doing something like that, because, you shouldn't really put any code into production that you don't really understand. It sounds like a pretty good recipe for a security vulnerability. But for doing like, for doing something like this, I think it's fine. And you could always also just get like a developer to look over the code to make sure that you don't have any security vulnerabilities, all those sorts of things. But doing something like this, it does enable you to work a lot faster. Like, the only point where we had someone that would even kind of represent a developer in this, that was Nico, and he built the seat selection tool, which goes into this custom action and then links to the dialogue API and all that sort of stuff. Now, It is worth noting, I should say, that this won't work in the Voiceflow canvas. Like, you won't be able to see the seat selection tool to get this to work. Like, we've had to basically do our own kind of chat widget and all that sort of thing. So again, if you want to see how the seat selection tool works and you want to get it to work, watch the dev labs and you can do all that.
And just to close the loop on the dev front, the reason I asked that, Pete, too, is like, just for folks, because there's been a few questions about the code versus the canvas, right? And like, we're in the workflow builder on Voiceflow now. Like, we haven't looked at the knowledge base, or obviously like the way in which the custom action was built, like Nico did. But like, blending code in this quick building, design experience environment is why a lot of folks are building this way, versus custom coding, hard coding a bot, right? Or using like an out of the box option like that. I wanted to hit on that, because I think a lot of folks are like, oh, Pete's a dev, and you would never call yourself a developer, right? But a lot of teams will have, massive teams of developers who are building the custom interface or the integration. You could use that as a component, or you're working hand in hand with a developer to like you did with Nico here, where you're both on the product team that owns this AI customer experience. So I just wanted to call, there's not like one size fits all. It's like, you either need to be non-technical or technical. It's like, you're blending code for this level of control. And then, to your point, Pete, it's like, if there's specific code in production that you need from a testing environment, we'll want to make sure that that's, fully baked and use it as a component here.
Yeah. I would like to stress again, I am not a developer. I like, literally, if you asked me to write some code for something, I could not do it.
Hey, well, John just said Peter's coding in natural language, it seems. These prompts are art. So hey, you've unlocked a new version here.
Look, again, I will say as well, like, the way that I prompt is like, I write an initial prompt, I try it out, then I work with a large language model to improve the prompts, like find out where there are holes in my prompts. I'll write the initial prompt, then I'll put a few test utterances through it. I'll say, this happened, this isn't what I wanted to happen. So like, let's go back and forward until we basically kind of like go back and forth on getting the right prompts. So these prompts aren't even entirely me. It's really about like the way that I use large language models is I try like use them as a conversational tool to kind of debug whatever it is I'm doing. So yeah, that's how I do it.
Ali asked, do you put that prompt through Claude? I think you kind of answered that, right? With
Yeah,
that you're building
exactly,
almost as a co-pilot with Claude. Yeah.
Exactly.
Great. Sorry to interrupt, but there were just a few questions around that, so I wanted to clarify. And yeah, we'll hop back in and we can keep going.
Sweet. Well, I mean, that's basically the whole flow. So I mean, we could jump into Q&A and that sort of thing here.
There's a good amount of questions that are very specific to different parts of the flow. So I think that's probably the best use of our time, right?
Yeah.
Let's do it. If there's more questions, keep them coming in the chat. If for some reason we can't get to them all, Pete and I love to send LinkedIn DMs after the fact and chop it up with folks. So keep them coming in the chat. And if we can't get to them, we'll definitely give you an answer. Okay, I'm going to share a few on stage here. Can you see that, Pete, on stage, this question?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So Olivia's asking, you made the joke about, I'm not bougie, so I'm not going to buy first class, right? But let's say like they come to the chat widget having booked economy. That's what the customer database says, right? Okay, the ticket is economy booking. Can technically, I don't know if the bot can do it today, but could you upgrade in the bot, or at least what do you think would be the lift to actually have that transaction as part of this flow?
Yeah, for sure. So you can't do that in this flow at the moment. I did think about doing that, but it was just effort that I didn't want to put in. But essentially, the seat selection tool, the way that this actually works is there was a price associated with every single seat. So potentially what you could have is a price within the Airtable that I had of the seat. And then you could go, is the price more or less? And if it is more, you could take them down to a flow which says, hey, like you've selected a seat which is more expensive. Are you okay if we charge that to your credit card or something like that? So that's how I would do it. But yeah, there was a price actually on the seat selection tool in the background. So yeah.
And we have many folks who are doing like a lead gen or sales or upsell use case. And a lot of times like they're embedding, whether it's their Stripe checkout, their Shopify checkout, their Salesforce Commerce Cloud data, like all within the custom interface to actually do the checkout in there, or just to redirect and like add to cart. Like I know, Pete, you create a lot of those carousels, right? Where it's like, hey, like here's 3 product recommendations, and like it's a deep link right into the product to actually like add to cart. It's a great way to do it, right?
Exactly.
Javier called it out. Yeah, embed a Stripe checkout. You can easily do that with extensions and actually have it right there and actually have that conversion happen right there. So awesome. Marcella asked, this was going from the beginning of the workshop, just to give you context. So there's a little bit of time delay here, but resolved in the same way in mobile. So talking about custom interfaces, you did it in chat. Have you thought about it in a different interface, or what have you seen other customers do that, Pete?
Yeah, look, I mean, because this is a chat window, in theory, you could do everything in mobile. Potentially, you want to change your chat interface slightly. I mean, really, you can do this in kind of any interface that you want. Like the dialogue API is super flexible, and you can basically use that API to handle the conversation, and you can display that conversation in any way that you want to do. So whether that be chat, voice, carrier pigeon, whatever.
Although I don't know if the API will make that call, but it'll try. Awesome. We are there. Resolved. Okay, we got a few questions around cost. So this is one of them. Sven was asking about like how do you even go about, like, you're using, I think, GPT-4o Mini here as the model?
I think for the responses, for all the state management stuff, so wherever there is state management, we're using Sonnet 3.5. So one of the trade-offs here when you are doing a state manager like this is you actually have to use the exact same LLM for all the prompts, because it's firing them off all at once in the one API call. So because I'm using Sonnet 3.5, it is, more expensive than GPT-4o Mini or Haiku. I tried really hard to get it to work with GPT-4o Mini, but it just doesn't do the reasoning very well. And sometimes it would also, like the JSON string wouldn't match exactly. So when I'm pulling the name and all that sort of stuff. So in terms of costs, I mean, we could kind of have a look and see what one of these APIs.
Why don't you click and even like show for folks who maybe are new, what that even model selection or like temperature and tokenization might look like.
Yeah, so if I just play from here, will that work? I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think that this should give us a rough idea anyway. So if we go debug mode, now it's worth noting these token costs are in Voiceflow tokens. So debug mode, why are you not showing
Token consumption there?
So yeah, this is GPT-4o. That feels wrong. Why is it? Let's do it one more time. So I'll just go vegetarian. Thanks. So this might not be entirely right because we don't have any of the input data going through, but we'll just try. So, I mean, it's not that much by the looks. It's like I did GPT-4o and the whole thing is coming at 984 Voiceflow tokens. So yeah, actually I do lie. I changed this to GPT-4o rather than Sonnet. It was Sonnet.
Yeah, if you could even show prompt settings and just hover here for a second, this would answer a lot of questions for folks. Like at Voiceflow, we care about just giving you complete control. So whether you're trying to do it incredibly cheap and like shorter responses, or you want to go super in depth with reasoning and you want to use GPT-4o or Claude Sonnet, you can adjust temperature, tokens, the system prompt, and then if you toggle in to the model there, Pete, just for folks on GPT-4o, you don't need to change it. But then you can obviously select and test these models here. So as far as cost goes, you have full control of the cost, right? What Pete's doing here is obviously pretty layered in terms of the tokens and the reasoning. But obviously in a situation like this, you can start to measure this bot compared to the existing benchmarks of, let's say, the cost of customer support tickets, right? That you typically come from folks who can't select a seat, or the cost of live agents when you have to do that at the actual airport or in check-in. We also have seen folks optimize for conversion, right? Where they're actually, we just did a really good case study with Sandlam that actually did say they boosted their offer to lead conversion to like 80%, which is like 4x the channel benchmark. So if you can actually drive incremental, and you internally you probably have a cost per lead or a lead value, if you can boost that incrementally, well then the token costs and are just the cost of a better conversion funnel there. So that level of control that Pete's showing, that's where we feel like, there's not one size fits all cost, but it's you're kind of doing that at each step and at each level of reasoning you're going about. But Pete, anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I think you covered it all. Basically, like this can be kind of as expensive or not as you want, depending on the model that you want to use. I have a feeling that token representation wasn't quite right because we don't have all the history of the conversation and all that input data that should have been going through it. So I would imagine that it would be larger, but it's hard to actually, I could try one more time actually if we went something like this and we just skip the seat selection tool and we go over to here like this, and then we can just go quickly. So we'll go, my name is John Doe and the booking number is book 001. So, I mean, this shows how that state works. So we're capturing everything all at once. And then we go, yes, check in. And we'll get that, check in everyone. So kind of that one, you're looking at about 1,400 Voiceflow tokens. So it's, to be fair, it's not that much.
No, and as models get better, the cost of doing really high quality reasoning is just going to continue to become more on par with existing tech.
I mean, GPT-4 Turbo probably would have been like 20,000 tokens. So,
right,
it's significantly cheaper.
I'm conscious of time here. We have about 10 or so minutes. Kezzy had a really good question here, thinking about like from like an airline business logic here, right? Does something like this support or could support in your conversational state different airline codes, right? Or like different segments? Like how would the bot handle like check-in rules and pricing for different segments? Not to say you designed it in that way today, Pete, but curious if you could think about, hey, like if you have customer data coming in, how would you maybe use an LLM here to better reason or rationalize the different segments from different airlines?
Yeah, I mean, the way this is built is it's basically you are calling an API and returning the information. So, I mean, as long as you capture the right information, call the right API, and get the information back, it's all the same that
Yeah.
I could
If
think of it.
quality data coming in, it's quality data coming in and a better conversation coming out, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, literally, you could, in this demo, we're just using Airtable. So, I can't really comment on, what airlines use to do all their checking in and all that sort of thing. We just used Airtable as a demo. In theory, if you can call an API and get that data from somewhere, then yeah, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, that's fair. And I know Kezia mentioned that she joined late. So yeah, we're using Airtable as the sandbox database here, but effectively this can be run through any API call to an existing CRM or anything that, in this example, JetBlue or a Porter or Qantas could be using to like actually have their booking and user data that would power that version of your bot too. So happy to go deeper if you have more questions there, Kezia. Awesome. We have about 10 minutes left, so let me popcorn a few more towards you, Pete, if that's all right.
Yep, sure.
Had a good question here from Victor. Any ideas yet for best practices for ensuring component builders communicate names and data formats to designers to avoid like typos and mismatches? Really about like you have a very specific conversational design key, right? Of how you label and color code and line and create. Do you have a system you use?
So I think what you're saying there, if I'm not mistaken, is kind of like, say a developer builds a function, how do you ensure that we are capturing the right data to input into that function, and the conversation designer is designing this in a way that works? I would say that the big part about that is probably going to be all about communication between the designer and the developer. And like something like this is, maybe you would have a developer working on this prompt in concert with the conversation designer, being like, this is the stuff that we need to capture. Like, it needs to be in these formats and that sort of thing. So that's the way that I would see it. Like, I don't think there's like, I strongly disagree with the idea of like a designer doing something, then throwing it over the fence to a developer to do. I think that, a developer needs to be involved with the whole process the whole time. And similarly, so does the designer. And so does your QA and all that sort of thing. If you have everyone working together the whole time, like, you'll get a better experience and you won't have as many like, unknowns happen throughout the process of designing a flow.
Yeah, teams we're seeing like approaching this as like literally truly a little bit more ambitious than just a basic bot or like the traditional NLU bot. They're approaching it like a true product workflow, like you would your mobile app or your website or your SaaS. Like, they're approaching these agents as true product workflows. So it's not just like, hey dev, like take this design and put it in production. We'll talk in 4 months. It's a true product lifecycle, product development lifecycle, as Pete's saying.
Yep.
Daniel had a fun one here, more just a side, but interesting to see how users could refer back to this agent to guide them through the airport after reserving a seat, almost like a in airport co-pilot per se, which honestly wouldn't be too tough if you could access any sort of like maps that exist a lot of times in these airport apps from an API perspective.
Yeah, or you could, if you had knowledge base of the airport, if you had a knowledge base with the airport details and all that sort of thing, you could ask questions and all that. One question that I saw pop up actually before was from Sven, which was, but how much does implementation for a model like this cost for a business to build? So I just wanted to touch on this quickly. So really, basically, the thing that you're going to be looking to pay for here, obviously there's that token cost, that's fairly minimal. Basically, your big costs are going to be in labor and, however, like depending on whether you are an enterprise client of Voiceflow or a Teams customer. So that will be your kind of platform fee and all that sort of thing. But really, your cost there is going to be on labor. If you think about this, though, doing this, and it is worth noting, these integrations were far more simple because it's just using Airtable. But this was 2 people. I built this probably over about 4 days, and Nico built his part over about two days or something like that. So you're looking at about like us working together, standing up something like this. Now, it hasn't been tested in front of users. I'm sure there's lots of holes in it that we haven't thought about, and that's kind of like the whole process. But to get something stood up like this, I mean, Nico and I have like used Voiceflow a lot, but doing something like this is like, for us, it was like
and yeah, you might be jumping into user testing next, right? And actually going through tests and iterations before it goes live. But we're seeing, we're seeing even like very secure industries like financial teams like the Sandlam team I mentioned, they're 4xing their time to market, and they're able to get an MVP in 1 to 2 months, right? Ready, tested, 3 months to market, where like the rest of the org and other orgs are still trying to like hard code into LLMs and trying to get initial MVPs. So that speed is important.
And they're only like three, four devs, I think.
And three, four product folks that are actually like contributing to that. Yeah.
So
really good question from Leslie here. Hold on one second. Leslie was asking about PI redaction or like sensitive data, right? Like a passport number. Pete, you've worked now like across industries, including finance, but also, even like e-com and such, that maybe there are PI things that need to be redacted. How have you seen folks tackle this? I know from the Sandland perspective that I can speak to, but how have you seen this from like a design perspective?
Yeah, look, so I would basically have something which sits between the dialogue API and kind of, your end chat results. Because the thing that is the most important is you don't want the people who are reviewing the chats to be able to see the PII. So you would put like a service between there that is redacting that sort of stuff. You can't do that currently within Voiceflow, but I wouldn't be surprised if we had something like that soon-ish.
Yeah, I just dropped a link to the Sandlam story. A lot of folks, I think, would find this interesting just because they use the middleware. They shared their whole architecture. They use a middleware for their financial data. A lot of like credit report, credit scores, where effectively like the transcripts on the Voiceflow end, we're not going to be looking at that, and all the customer support staff is not going to see everyone's credit numbers or ID numbers similar to here. So, that's why we made Voiceflow extensible. So if you have middleware or you have regulations that you need to like pass data through, you can do that, as Pete mentioned, pre-dialogue API or post-dialogue API, to make sure that what's in production is not, sensitive on the back end.
Exactly. Similarly as well, like things that you could start to do is like on this, like on the custom action that we have over here, like this is happening kind of outside of the dialogue API, and my mouse has just completely died now. This is happening outside of the dialogue API. So this is like the custom interface, which is happening, the user is clicking, etc. I'm then like, it's outputting some JSON, and then I'm turning that JSON into a variable that I can use. But like, it's like the chat window. So if we quickly went over to here, let me have a look. Like you wouldn't see the part where, so if we go here, check in all, you just see complete here. That's all that happens. You don't see the actual seats and that sort of thing. So, if you were using a form or something like that with a custom action, you could just have a like complete. You wouldn't know exactly what the user enters or anything like that.
Yeah, you can effectively redact away all of the information into your secure cloud environments if you need. What Pete was just showing is the transcripts feature in Voiceflow. So similar, just different parts of the build before jumping back into Canvas here.
Yeah.
Great. Awesome. I have one more question here, Pete. I would love your take on this. A little longer, but I just read it. I'll give you the TLDR. Gary is pretty much saying, hey, like, is the cost of processing all of these expensive prompts and like the quality of what you created actually more effective and efficient than the live agent or the way that that flow is currently serviced? I have my take. I can share it, but I would love from you as the builder perspective, how are you seeing that, like the cost of new outweighing the opportunity cost of staying the same with these experiences?
Yeah, look, I would say that the cost of doing a flow would be like this would probably be in the cents or low dollar amount. That is my gut. Generally, it costs, I can say in Australia and companies that I've worked for, it costs about $25 for an agent to pick up the phone, and have like a 1 or 2 minute conversation or something like that. So yes, my my assumption would be that this is considerably cheaper. And I think what flows like this enable you to do is that if you can work out what is the like highest demand to a contact center that an agent that is easily automatable, you can start reducing demand on a contact center. So I know like during COVID, this was really important. Like you couldn't hire contact center people fast enough. And by doing that, because you're doing something that is easy and repeatable, you're enabling like that to get done. Your customers themselves are happy because that thing gets done and it's easy. And then you're able to let your agents on the actual phones like handle more complex things where you actually do need a human touch.
Yeah, it's spot on. And the other thing I'd add to that is Pete's talking about, that savings and being more efficient on the cost per ticket lens here for some of these FAQs. But then there's also the point of like, okay, you're enabling a new conversion point, right? You're removing friction to, let's say, upgrade seats or add a meal, or to the point of Olivia earlier, upgrade to business class. Now, these are not new business problems, right? There's a conversion rate or like a cost per head of someone spending at JetBlue. Like our best advice to product teams starting is saying pick an existing business metric and problem and try to improve it, whether that's offer to lead percentage like the Sandland team, or whether that's a Trilogy, a Voiceflow customer that's saying, hey, I want to cut my cost per ticket from 25 down to 0 because it's fully AI resolved. You have to move an existing business metric. So that's where Pete and I, instead of playing in like the art of the possible, we'll get there, and we're starting to get there with folks. But like let's pick a business metric on the customer experience or the customer support side and make it more efficient, or convert more effectively, like we talked about at the top. So this has been a fantastic jam-packed hour, Pete. Appreciate you sharing this. I think the chat was as active as the quality of experience you created here. So it was really fun to see folks get a dive in here. For folks who are still watching live or watching the recording after, we're going to be sending out a recording of the template, this project, as well as any resources via email if you signed up, attended, or not attended. So you'll be getting that now. You can also find it in the comments if you're watching after the fact. And yeah, we're excited to see what people do to stealing parts of this flow, taking the whole flow for your own area, and seeing how you can improve support or experience this way. So Pete, appreciate your time as always, and we'll wrap there.
Thanks. Have a good one, guys.
Awesome. Thanks all.